Good morning, everyone. We want to thank you for attending today's webinar, which will take a look at developing a sustainable supply chain strategy. All of you will be in listen-only mode for the duration of this presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question and answer section of your webinar control panel, and I will pose them to the speaker at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the NLPA member site by week's end. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you today's speaker, Mr. David Millington. David is the Director of Product Development and Education for NLPA. He's a subject matter expert in both supply management and continuous improvement engineering with over 20 years experience. David brings hands-on experience at the VP, Director, and Manager levels, guiding and facilitating the development of strategic and tactical solutions to intricate organizational, product, and services challenges. He also holds the SPSM Level 3, CPOE, both from NLPA, the CNPDP from the PDMA, ESPP from ASM. He is certified Lean Six Sigma Six Best and holds a master's degree in quality systems management from the New England College of Business. Thank you all for joining us today as we look forward to this presentation.
Well, Amber, thank you very much for that very kind very kind introduction. And today's webinar is going to be a four-part series. We're going to do part one of a four-part series, and we have a lot of material to cover. And as Amber mentioned, we're going to be doing at some point some polling questions to get a feel of your environments and to have an understanding of the supply management community as a whole as it relates to sustainability issues. So with that said, we're going to touch on understanding customer requirements, understanding business and market sustainability requirements, the principles of developing a supply sustainability strategy, executing a supply sustainability strategy, monitoring and institutionalizing a sustainable supply strategy, and of course, as I mentioned before, the interactive poll questions. So this webinar is going to be in two parts. We're going to touch on general sustainability, and then we're going to be touching on supply management and supply chain management sustainability. So on the general side, there are many definitions of sustainability, and it's an evolving field. And one of the very common definitions that I see is that it's the capability or the capacity to continuously conduct certain activities indefinitely. So sustainability in the modern context has three primary pillars: environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and of course, social sustainability. So environmental sustainability is underpinned or focuses on the capability of the global community to sustain levels of pollution, resource depletion to an indefinite continuum. And economic sustainability is the capacity of an economy to indefinitely sustain definitive levels of production. And when we look at sustainability on the social side, we see that it's the ability of human systems to indefinitely operate at a definitive level of harmony and social well-being. Genocide, corruption, poverty, illiteracy are examples of socially unstable systems and systems that are not meeting the modern social sustainability requirements. And of course, most of the webinars that we have done here at NLPA, we focus on relative topics, in this case, sustainability within the context of value creation. with the understanding that organizations exist to create value for stakeholders and for their customers. And value has three components: that there's a conversion or a transformation of raw material inputs from one stage to the next. And all of the associated activities are done right the first time. And of course, customers are willing to pay for the resulting output or products and services from those activities. So we need to keep that in mind, and we're going to use that backdrop as an underpinning as we unpack today's webinar. So sustainability in, again, the general sustainability parameters, we see that there are many programs out there that manage sustainability. And one of the findings is that very few of them focus on all three sustainability types: the economic, environmental, and social. They usually focus on one of these sustainability requirements or focuses at the expense of the other. So a typical NGO will focus on the environmental context. The United Nations Environmental Program, they also focus primarily on the environmental context. The World Trade Organization, they focus, of course, on the economic side at the expense of the environmental and the social side. And we see that the United Nations, because they have limited budgets and this constrains their effectiveness, they focus on all three dimensions. So in many settings, sustainability is seen as an afterthought, as something, once we get into matters of sustainability, diversity, social responsibility, many organizations, their culture is such that they see those initiatives as nice to have, and initiatives that cost money and that there's very little return on those investments. But I would like to focus on the benefit of leveraging sustainability programs as we get into to give us the right impetus and the backdrop as we get into how to develop and to deploy and to sustain an effective sustainability strategy. Why would we want to go this route? Why would we want to have sustainability systems in place? Well, here's a 5-point business case for leveraging those programs. And number 5, and this for supply chain and procurement folks, of course, number 5, it's a point of a critical focus. Cost reduction is one of the critical benefits. Of course, then number 4 is an engaged workforce, and there are many benefits that come as a result of having an engaged and cohesive workforce. A few years ago, Gallup did a survey of the United States workforce, and they found about 80 to 85% of the employees are not engaged in the day-to-day activities. And that lack of an engagement, it does have other costs. And the key is, and I'm going to go through a total cost to serve and total cost to ownership. And those are critical tools that we could use to unlock some of those dimensions, those things, those parameters that are more or less hidden in organizations, and organizations struggle to quantify those dimensions. But to have an engaged workforce does impact organizational cohesiveness and long-term sustainability. And competitive advantage, there is a tremendous demand for sustainable products and services, and there's a trend, it's a moving trend. And later on, we're going to get into environmental scanning, where we assess and we understand and we quantify the trends in our business landscape. Then number 2, we see the leverage of innovation. Many organizations are utilizing collaborative effort between the internal processes and the supplier and customer processes to realize true innovation, to realize a huge return on investment from sustainability programs. And then there are many investment opportunities for organizations that would like to or already have sustainability programs. So there's a very strong business case to go in this direction. So in terms of the potentials for cost reduction, we're going to look at carbon footprint, of course, manufacturing and logistics, sustainability. We're going to look at those, and we see that the carbon footprint, to define that and to really understand, it's very important that we have a thorough understanding of what sustainability is in the general context, and what supply chain and what supply management sustainability is. Because us as procurement professionals, we're mandated to protect our organizations from risk. So if there are any types of elements that could bring undue risk and brand damage to organizations, we have to be aware. We have to be part of those processes that quantify and analyze those dimensions. So in terms of definition of the carbon footprint, it's a measure of the number of tons of carbon dioxide caused by greenhouse emissions produced by the activities of organizations and individuals. And in terms of once we get into environmental scanning, it's very important to understand the trends and the shifts in consumer taste. And there is a growing desire from the modern customer for eco-friendly products that are made with supply chains that have low carbon footprints. And it's a good best practice to understand these dimensions and to be proactive and not to be reactive. Then manufacturing sustainability. Manufacturing is a critical component of the supply chain. So we have, just to reiterate, we have the upfront process, the sourcing. So we source, we procure the mission critical inputs and raw materials to be converted into useful products that are shipped. So the logistics is a critical component of the supply chain. The procurement function is a critical subset of the supply chain, as well as the manufacturing or conversion processes. So manufacturing sustainability is a design and development, commercialization of products that are cost effective, that have minimal social, environmental, and resource impacts. So these products and services are made using the minimal amount of resources possible. And then we have logistics sustainability, which is the design and execution of logistics networks. This is very, very important. In our, we've just finished designing our leadership course, supply management executive course, and that goes deep into these parameters, including logistics sustainability and network design. So it's very important that us as procurement and supply chain professionals, we look at and we understand how our networks are designed. Are they designed for sustainability? Are they designed for limited usage of energy, fuel, and environmental impacts? And I believe Amber probably has a question for me.
We do. We received one question that just came in. And
Sure.
What happens environmentally friendly goods are more costly?
What happens if environmental goods are more...
Environmentally friendly goods are more costly?
Okay, so there could be a number of reasons for that. And on the raw material side, that could be a reality where the inputs are more costly. And of course, internally, if you look into organizations, it's quite possible that the manufacturing and conversion processes may be more costly. But as we get later on into this webinar and the future webinars, you're going to unlock how we could realize eco-friendly products at a lower price point, and it is possible to do that if we understand our total cost to serve and we understand all of the what we call waste activities and process waste, organizational waste. There are a whole plethora of opportunities to reduce costs to be able to bring to market eco-friendly products. And we even go into product design. Again, our leadership course for supply executives covers a lot of those issues, and we're yet to launch that as part of the SPSM4 series. But you go into looking at doing rationalization on your supply chains, doing rationalizations on your customers, and many times we do rationalizations on our product line, and we say, hey, to have an eco-friendly product line for us is more expensive. But there are many rationalizations that most organizations don't do, and if they do, they would unlock a tremendous amount of cost reduction opportunities beyond the price points. And also beyond the price points of the raw material inputs from our suppliers. There are many ways to do that, and this series we're gonna unpack and unlock a lot of those dimensions. We're also designing our sustainability course. That's going to be integrated with the supply management executive course, which covers a lot of these areas. I hope that answers your question, but we're going to get there. When we look at one of the critical pieces of developing a sustainable supply chain or sustainable supply management mechanism is to do benchmarking. Okay, and then to look at best-in-class organizations, look at how they have done it, and then the key takeaway or the key underpinning is to be able to translate those best practices into organizations, so that this way they're a good cultural fit. Not every practice or best practice that an organization does may be compatible with our current culture. So there may be many dimensions that are good strategic fit, and if that's the case, then it's up to us as procurement professionals to do our due diligence and to leverage best practices at the core. A little later on, we're going to go into a model that was designed by subject matter experts at NLPA to help us to give perspective in how we do this. And please remember models, right? The word models. And when you look at Levi's, the way they did it, and to realize products with a lower carbon footprint, lower environmental impacts at great price points. One of the things that they did was that they designed and they leveraged robust solution models. So that's very important. If you want to go into things of this nature without some type of model or roadmap, then we're asking for trouble. If we as supply management and supply chain professionals see opportunity and we don't have a clear-cut roadmap to sort of, if we have to lead those initiatives, then it's easy to get pushback and get those initiatives shut down. So why should supply management professional care about supply chain sustainability and supply management sustainability? And we're going to, a little later on, we're going to get into NLP's definition of supply sustainability as opposed to the general sustainability. So the benefits from Levi's, from their strategic action, right? Number 7, if you look at that, we see reduction in product cost. Yes, they realize a reduction in product cost. So the key here is to do our due diligence and research on how did they realize a reduction in product costs. How is that possible? Then one of the key underpinnings that they did, and I mentioned this before, is on the product side, they designed for X. Now I'm going to design for X. We could do a whole course on that. Again, our supply management executive leadership course goes into design for X and quality function deployment. But to design a product for X, X means that the different requirement variables, the different customer requirement variables, the different business requirements, stakeholder requirements, variables, and in this case, sustainability requirements, variables. Now, I mentioned stakeholder and business requirements variables, right? So this means that a business exists to create value, to profitably create value for their customers. It's just a short format. So the fact that this has to be profitable, and if we do decide to leverage sustainability, it has to be profitable. As the question before alluded, that in some cases it could elevate the price points. So if we leverage and we look at design for X, so we design for sustainability, and we also at the same time, we design for profitability. So again, NLP, our level 4 series would help, is designed to help procurement leaders to strategically think through all of these dynamics and contradictions. Because many times in business, we face contradictions that make impact on our processes, impact on our people and our organizations. And a lot of times these contradictions come in pairs. For example, a common contradiction in business is the demand for speed of execution of the work at hand, or the process speed, and then the demand for accuracy. So at many times, customers, they want things quicker, and they want it quicker, and they want it cheaper. A cheaper way to execute and to bring a product to market is to make sure that everything that pertains to that product is accurate, right? Everything is accurate, including the billing and the shipping. Everything, the entire end-to-end experience from the customer is accurate. But in many times we see that if we demand speed, and the customers demand speed, that accuracy falters. So we sort of have to slow things down to be more accurate. But in many cases in business, there's a demand for those two things. And those two things, theoretically, they contradict each other, but there's solutions for that. There are solutions for that. And again, this will be one of the talking points in the future part of this webinar series. But design for X, where we design for all of the critical needs and requirements, and we make sure that they are met. And there are tools and methodologies to do this. They also realize an increase in product quality, so they did not have to cut corners on quality to realize a cost reduction. So many times I've heard, well, if we increase product quality, right, and then we would increase the cost. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If we're able to unlock the elements of waste, organizational waste, which constitutes about 60% of the activities in a typical organization, don't add value. About 60%. About 10% of the activities in a typical organization add value. And then about 30% do not add value, but they're necessary. So one of the key things to do is to look at the areas that are non-value added waste. If we look at that, then we would be able to bring products that are eco-friendly, products that are higher quality. We could get them to market more quickly and at a lower price point. And one of the things that Levi's was able to do was to reduce the cost of operations. right? It's right there. Point number 3, reduction in process waste, transportation, unnecessary motion. Every time, for example, a supplier ships the wrong product or they ship short, or our organizations, our logistics processes ship the wrong product or we ship a defective product, that adds the cost. So if we're able to understand and to improve our processes where they have a high degree of excellence, then we will reduce the cost. And yes, the products could be eco-friendly as well. So the waste, remember, 60% of our organizations have organizational waste in them. So if you unlock 30% or half of that, then we would have realized a tremendous cost reduction. And this is also the work of procurement professionals to look at these parameters. So it's about strategically looking at our value chain. And yes, we focus on the price points that we get from our suppliers, but that's not the only consideration. So imagine we get a 10 or 15% cost reduction on raw material inputs from our customers, from our suppliers. If we quantify that and we quantify and we address the organizational waste in our organizations, many times the cost of unnecessary transportation, unnecessary motion, overproduction in our processes, they would trump the reduction in the price point in raw material inputs. So is this only for big companies? No, not necessarily. There's a $5 trillion market, US dollar market for green or sustainably built products. And about 60% of small and mid-sized enterprises globally are investing in technologies to enable low carbon footprint capabilities and other sustainability dimensions. So that's something to think about. That is something to definitely think about. Then we go into the benefits of sustainable logistics. One of the key things here, and again for supply chain and procurement professionals in particular, right? A reduction in supply chain complexity would increase our profitability. So if we simplify the way we do things, again, remove the non-value added activities as much as possible, because they bring a layer of complexity into our systems, then there's a possibility to make our supply chains more economic, right? Or fiscally sustainable. And if we reduce complexity in our supply chains, we reduce the probability of error. If we have an increased errors in our supply chain, we ship the wrong products, or we receive the wrong raw material inputs, then we still have to deliver those. So then the carbon footprint will be higher, and the raw material usage. If we have, our organizations have what you call a low first pass yield or a high scrap rate, that would cause a high utilization of raw materials, and that's not sustainable. Which company could continue to operate like that? So a key is to leverage supplier selection scorecards and to tie and to only select suppliers who can provide us with those mission critical raw materials at great price points that are eco-friendly and sustainable. So we search those suppliers out who are able to do that. Our route optimization, another very, very, very important piece of logistics sustainability. And I'm going to get into section 2. And Amber, before we go deep into section 2, could we get the polling questions up? I'm going to pause for a minute. And I would love if you all could, my dear audience, if you could help us fill this out, and it would give us some insight on our current state situation as it relates to supply sustainability, and could give us some ideas on how we could improve those dimensions. See if you could fill this. And Amber, could you please provide me with the results? I'll make a note of the results. I just want to capture the scores.
Yes, of course. Give me, how long do you want to leave this open? Do you want one more minute?
Yeah,
okay.
Like another minute or so.
I'll close the polling
Sure.
in 60 seconds.
Sure.
And while we're waiting on that, I'll go ahead and I've got one more question that just came in.
Sure.
Any attendees who are buyers in manufacturing companies with multiple sites? I think that they're just asking if there's anyone else out there. I don't know if that's a direct question for you or not.
Oh, with multiple sites?
Yes.
So could you repeat that?
Yes, it just said, oh, it was just, okay, they just typed in and said it was directed to the attendees, so you can ignore that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, also to the number of sites that an organization has. I mean, that's a supply chain rationalization that would have to be made, and how economical all those sites are. Are there any sites that drive unnecessary costs or add to complexity? So this is all about strategically looking at our value chain and our value streams to optimize and to improve the way we do things, and to bring that degree of economic sustainability for organizations, of course, which covers, again, eco-friendly products being at the right price point. Is it fiscally viable to have that, and to be environmentally conscious as well? So we see that to what extent are procurement activities driven by both internal and external customer requirements? So we see 45% of folks so 45% of folks, 45% of our organizations, that is a reality, and about 9%. So 45% of organizations, it's fairly customer requirements, internal and external customer requirements constitute about a fair part of the activities underpinned by those dimensions. And then about 27% of organizations are driven by those requirements. So that's a very, very interesting finding. And then the next one, to what extent are senior procurement leaders in your organization significant contributors to the design of our corporate strategic planning process? So about 45% are somewhere in the middle, and about 27% of those organizations, those leaders are definitely and strongly part of those processes. Very, very interesting. Okay, then the other question, to what value do senior leaders in the organization place on strategic supply sustainability management? Oh, this is a very, very interesting very interesting poll. Very interesting responses. So about 36% of senior leaders place value strong value or strong emphasis on strategic supply sustainability management. To what extent does your organization both understand and leverage supply sustainability best practices? So about 36%, that's the strongest bucket, about 36% have like a reasonably good leverage of best practice, sustainability best practices. Again, very interesting responses. And then the final one, to what extent is supply sustainability criteria an important underpinning of your supplier selection process, as we mentioned earlier? So about 36% leverage those criteria or see those criteria as a critical component of the supplier selection process. Very interesting. And only a small percentage, about 9%, those parameters are not a critical component of the supplier selection process. As we go through section 2, we would see, and I'm going to close this out, as we go through section 2, many of us may sort of do a rethink on the importance of developing a supply sustainability strategy. So the traditional mandate of the procurement function is to manage spend, support operations, and to protect our organizations from risk. But what we're seeing is in modern times is that there's a demand for executives to embrace sustainability best practices, to embrace social responsibility and diversity best practices. And it's from this lens, a new definition of supply sustainability has emerged. So one of the very important things that we have to do in realizing supply sustainability strategy is, of course, to form or to leverage the best practice of forming a category or commodity team. And in this case, a team that's specifically designated for sustainability, or it could be part of, or it could be the same team, the same category and commodity team that would focus on all of the other critical components of supply chain and supply management activities. And essentially, a team of this nature is composed of key stakeholders. So the logistics head would have to be there, the head of procurement, the head of the manufacturing or conversion processes, and of course all of the enabling team leaders. Sales and ops, sales have to be there, someone in sales, and someone in finance. So these are some of the key folks who would be part of such a team. And what this does, it builds, number one, it builds synergy, it breaks down silos, and it enables and enhances operational cohesiveness. So it's very, very important that that's one of the first things that we do. And this methodology is one of the best practices that's underpinned in our 14 procurement best practices course. A really, really awesome course. For those of you who have not taken it, you may want to consider doing that. Right. So once we leverage that sustainability commodity and category team, then it would help us to effectively design and develop and execute our strategies. Because many times organizations, we have these nice, strategies, and very little of those strategies get executed. And if they are, they're very few of those strategies are executed in a timely fashion and in a cost-effective and efficient way. So Next Level Purchasing Association has coined this definition of strategic supply sustainability. It is a reliable, efficient, cost-effective, collaborative, responsive, agile, and socially responsible methodology for the procurement of mission-critical inputs that create innovative value to meet customer and organizational requirements with the least possible impact on the environment. And I'll leave that up there for a minute. So if you could just hone in on that definition. So, my colleagues, I advise you to be strategic in selecting your supply sustainability criteria. Again, these criteria are reliability, efficiency, cost effectiveness, collaboration upstream with your suppliers, collaboration internally with your internal stakeholders and internal counterparts, and of course downstream to your customers. Responsiveness. So for a supply chain or supply management or procurement system to be effective, it has to be responsive. And of course, it has to be agile, innovative. It has to pose innovative value creation where we leverage the creative capabilities and assets of our suppliers, and of course, back to supplier selection. That is one of the key components in developing a good strategy. That we only have suppliers that are very capable and are very aligned with our organizational goals, objectives, and culture. And of course, minimal environmental impact. So it must have, these are the critical criteria that would underpin a sustainable supply mechanism of sustainable procurement. So leverage a model for supply sustainability. As I mentioned before with Levi's, they came up with a model, and I guess this model was compatible, a good organizational fit. It was a good fit with their customers, and of course, a good fit with their suppliers. And again, I have to reiterate, having the suppliers that are capable and aligned is one of the most critical underpinnings here. So NLPA designed a model or a roadmap that would help us unpack and to realize supply sustainability. And it is underpinned by customer and again, business requirements. And one of the critical business requirements is, of course, brand and enhancement in brand equity and profitability and understanding one's organizational landscape. Very important. The outputs of such an understanding are the formulation of innovative and executed strategies that are ingrained in an organization's DNA. So this is the model. And the model starts from the base up. We have to understand and do our due diligence and understand our customer requirements. Again, I see a significant number of organizations, their activities are underpinned according to our polling results by customer requirements, internal customer requirements and external customer requirements. We're going to unpack some tools that would help us fine-tune those mechanisms. Of course, market research and understanding of our market, and of course the business requirements. So the customer requirements, the market requirements, and the business requirements. We must conduct an environmental scan, and what this does, it helps, and when I say environmental, I mean the operating landscape. So yes, ecology or the environment is one of those dimensions, but of course the fiscal situation of our market, understanding our industry, understanding the shifts in customer taste and customer demand and customer requirements, understanding the socio-demographics that impact and underpin our supply chains, understanding the technological disruptions, right? What technology is being leveraged by our competitors, or what technologies would we have to ingrain in our supply chains and our procurement functions going forward in order to be competitive. We see the rise of digitization, and we see how those dimensions, blockchain, AI, how they are, and other methodologies, how they're impacting the procurement function. So, and of course, we have to benchmark against best in class, and then we have to be part of the development and to understand the processes that underpin developing a corporate strategy. So we have to be part of that process. And then it's as far as the planning is concerned, this is in 4 dimensions: plan, implement, or plan, do, check, meaning we see how well we realize our mandates, and then if there's some performance gaps, we take corrective action, and then it's a continuum. So by being part of the development of the corporate strategy, this gives us a tremendous advantage. And historically, procurement, it in many cases, even from the results that we see, and in most cases, procurement, they're not really part of the design of corporate strategy, and this puts us at a disadvantage. So, and then to develop a procurement strategy that's aligned and linked to the corporate strategy, that in a way that the procurement function, it supports and it enables our organizations to realize the organizational mandates and goals and objectives. So that the procurement and supply chain functions have to enable the entire organization to succeed. So the planning we have 5 blocks for planning, and there's 1 block for implementation across 3 dimensions: the procurement or procure to pay processes. We make them world-class. Our production or make or conversion processes, we make sure that they're dramatically enhanced, as close to world-class as possible. And then I'll fulfill our logistics processes. Again, we're as close to world-class, or we continuously improve those processes with world-class or near world-class vision of world-class or near world-class status in mind. If we're able to do that and execute those critical processes that way, then we would realize our procurement function and our supply chain would be sustainable. And of course, we deploy the right metrics, we measure the right things, and we measure how well we are executing our procurement function mandates and our corporate mandates. And then we institutionalize those processes, and we manage change. And for procurement professionals, I guess their primary focus will be to institutionalize the procure, the improve and enhance procure to pay processes. And this is I'm a little pressed for time, but here we have the process across the dimensions of plan, do, check, act, of the necessary steps to take to realize our sustainable supply chain or supply management mechanism. And this here is a customer requirements matrix. It's a manufacturing example. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but once you get the slides, you could study this. Feel free to shoot me an email to elaborate. But for all of those organizations that this is one of the key underpinnings for the activities, then hats off to you, congratulations, you're doing well. And I'm sure that many things in your organization are moving along with great efficiency and effectiveness. For those organizations that the procurement activities and the overall activities in the organization is not underpinned by customer requirements, then that's a critical area of concern. And if we're able to leverage customer requirements and make sure that our suppliers are aligned and capable of delivering our raw material inputs in a way that would enable the realization of these customer requirements, then we'll be on the road to achieving a truly sustainable, a generally sustainable organization, and definitely a sustainable supply of raw material inputs, a sustainable supply, sustainable procurement function, and as a chain supplying of our customer requirements. And there's a misalignment and misalignment in business across any spectrum drives cost. Again, if we do our due diligence and really understand the critical customer requirements, and they may have many of them, but usually there are about somewhere between 3 and 7 critical requirements. And if you understand them, and we understand them in terms of the importance to the customers and the degrees of significance to our customers, and again, we align our product designs to conform to those degrees of importance. And what I mean by that is that customers, if we do the analysis, we may find that there might be some requirements that are more important than others, even the critical. So let's say you have 7 critical, what they call customer requirements, right? Not all 7 usually would have an equal degree of importance. So if you know which one is at the top of the list, which one is number 7 in order of significance, and we make sure our customers and our processes are aligned and they're not skewed. We're not overspending our budgets on those parameters that are not as important to the expense of the requirements that are more important, because that would yield customer dissatisfaction. That would mean that there's some flaw in an understanding of customer requirements to the execution of those requirements. It's very, very important that we understand that and we aligned. And this is an example for service. In this case, a healthcare example, because I know many times I get questions about are these tools and methodologies, are they applicable to the service environments? Yes, they are. And this is an example here. Where you could do a patient requirements in this case. And we have 10 process steps for realizing and capturing the critical customer requirements. And these, again, are a key underpinning of what should be a key underpinning of our activities going forward. Understand your market. Right? Again, the model, remember the base of the model was customer requirements, business requirements, and market requirements. So a lot of times we understand our business requirements. We have our profit and loss statements. We have our statements of cash flow. We have our EBITDA. We have different ratios. And sometimes there's a weakness on really truly understanding our markets and our customer requirements. And from the survey, the polling questions, we see that customer requirements is an area for improvement with this group on this webinar. So here is a tool that could be used for this, where we look at the different market forces that impact the reliability of our supply reliability, our supply chain reliability, and you all could download this and really assess our organizations to see where we stack up as far as those market force dimensions and areas of impact on sustainability are. So, and here's the process for conducting environmental scanning. As I mentioned before, understanding our external and, of course, internal operating landscapes. As I mentioned before, their socio-demographic, competitive, economic, ecological, political, technological, industry, and customer trends and forces and impact that converge on our organizations. And we have to understand it from 3 dimensions. What trends are currently occurring? And then we have to answer the fundamental question, what are the impacts of these trends and these forces in our organizations? And then the final question, how are our organizations positioned to deal with those trends? So the environmental scanning, understanding customer requirements, conducting the market research, and of course doing, many times we do a SWOT analysis on the organizational level, but many of us do not do a SWOT analysis on our departmental level. So it's very important that we do a SWOT analysis on our procurement function and or our supply chain function. So this way we could understand those dimensions and we could compare those SWOT dimensions to the corporate SWOT dimensions to look for areas of opportunity, to put in place the necessary risk analysis dimensions that we would have to put in place. And of course, leverage a framework, a strategic framework that's underpinned by mission and vision. This is very, very basic stuff, but if you ask many, I'm sure if I ask many of my colleagues in the supply chain space, what's your mission? They may, and if I ask 5 different people in the same organization, what's your mission? I might get 5 different answers. And what's the vision? So another way of saying that, if I get different answers, there's a variation in, number 1, thought processes. There's a variation in goals and objectives. And that is the perfect recipe for an unsustainable organization. That is the perfect recipe for an organization who strives to meet customer requirements, stakeholder requirements, and business requirements in a sustainable way. It sounds for the perfect recipe for introducing many of the dimensions that drive operational costs and inefficiencies. So being part of an understanding how these processes go and working with a 1 to 2 page framework, keep it simple. That's the key. So you have the high level strategies and then you have the initiatives that drive those strategies. And if you look at strategy number 2, affordable, eco-friendly products, we have a person who's assigned to that. That's the goal, right? To realize the corporate mission. And then we have 2 objectives here. To realize that, convert non-biodegradable raw material inputs to eco-friendly raw materials, right? So this is a procurement mandate, part of the procurement mandate. And then number 2 is quality function deployment to look at, and we're going to touch on this on one of the next webinars, next parts of, one of the other parts of this series. I'm going to touch on quality function deployment and value engineering, where we look at how could we re-engineer our products and services to increase the quality, include the eco-friendly dimensions and reduce the cost. If you look at organizational excellence, the exceptional technology and operational capability, then we see supplier improving the skills of our procurement team, and then aligning our metrics to strategy, And of course, some organizations are deploying digitization to realize sustainability and other improvements. And this is how the framework, simple framework, looks in as one piece. And we have to prepare for transformation and to manage change. If we are about, or we strive to realize sustainability or supply general sustainability or supply sustainability, we want to make sure that our procurement and supply chain processes execute in a way, again, with minimal impact on the environment, and we have that it's cost effective, it's agile, it's reliable. So these are the parameters or the metrics for supply sustainability. Then we have to prepare we have to be prepared to manage transformation and change. If this is a new thing to our organizations, we really have to be able to manage change. And NLPA designed this model that would help organizations transform their procurement operations. And again, it's integrated with the environmental scanning, and it's integrated with the model that we saw earlier in how we would realize supply sustainability, the customer, market, and business requirements across the board should be the key underpinnings of all major initiatives, departments, and processes and people. That should be the key underpinning across the board, including the strategies at the procurement level and strategies at the corporate level. And there are 9 dimensions of this, and we have to be able to think in a very systemic way and to look at our supply chains as a system and understand the different parts and components and peoples and technologies and layouts and networks that make up this our supply chains. And we have to understand customer requirements and leverage process improvement and supply sustainability, improve our processes, technology, machines, and materials, ensure we have the right people available and they're aligned to our vision, and ensure that those people have the right skills. NLPA has the PASS program, which is an assessment of procurement skills for success, and then ensure that you create a culture of respect and appreciation, and make sure that our places are ergonomic and efficient and visually controlled, and then make sure that we have the right metrics and balanced scorecards, that we're leveraging those, and ensure accountability for the procurement function and supply function mandates. So there's accountability, and of course we effectively manage risk and unintended consequences. In part 2, we're going to go deep into this tool. We're going to unpack this with a tool that has been created by NLPA to help you all to be able to transform your procurement functions and supply management and supply chain functions. Again, supply sustainability, the success for that, you measure for success, you measure responsiveness, you measure reliability, you measure agility, you measure cost effectiveness, you measure the degree of eco-friendly capability and where you are, current state and future state, and of course you measure your efficiency. So here is the supply sustainability metrics framework. So this here is a caveat and a key underpinning of if we want to have an effective supply, a sustainable supply strategy. A critical component is that we have to be able to measure how effective we are at realizing that mandate, those strategic mandates. And again, here are the dimensions here to your left. They're environmental, financial, and operations focused. And then you have, for responsiveness, you have the operational definitions, the speed at which tasks are performed, reliability, the ability to perform tasks as required, agility, the ability to respond to external influences, changes in demand, your upside, flexibility, your downside, supply chain adaptability, then your cost effectiveness, total cost to serve, and then your efficiency of use of assets, and of course the environmental impacts. Walmart created what we call a supplier environmental sustainability index, which is made up of several different measures, and they have used what you call a weighted average scorecard to scorecard their suppliers and then how effective they are in terms of sustainability. In this case, environmental sustainability. But again, I just want to reiterate, the focus of this webinar is supply chain and supply management sustainability, right? So that encompasses, of course, the environmental side and these metrics that we see here. If we're responsive, we're reliable, we're agile, we're cost effective, we utilize our assets efficiently with minimal environmental impact, then we have achieved sustainability. So one of the key things that caveats in terms of realizing cost or making this a very a lower cost proposition, and we have to prepare that business case. If we attack responsiveness, we attack reliability issues, we attack the efficient use of our assets, we will be able to unlock a whole plethora of cost reductions that would better enable us to realize eco-friendly products. So back to the original question, the first question that we had. And I think we're going to stop here for the day. A little bit over, but we have the total cost to serve rationalization. And many of us, we're familiar with what you call the total cost of ownership. This is another way of looking at our situation, and we could use it to rationalize products. We could use it usually it's used to rationalize customers. What does it cost to serve a customer or a customer profile or a customer segment over another customer profile or customer segment? But it could also be used to rationalize and the total cost to serve particular types of supply chains, because some organizations have different types of supply chains. They may have make to stock, make to order, and engineer to order in their product mix. So it's very important that we understand our total cost to serve. And in this case, I used a particular supply chain type. And if you look at two of them, and if you look at make to stock, we see, for example, there was $600,000 in sales for a period, and then we do the labor, what they call the labor costs, the raw material costs, then we derive the cost of goods sold, and we get the gross margin, and then we have the administrative costs, the cost of returns. If you look at that, the cost of quality. If you look at that, the cost of billings, the cost of expedited orders, the cost of delivery, the cost of sourcing. How many of us in our supply chain activities, the processes outside of the labor costs, how many of us itemize and document and quantify the cost of sourcing? If we do that as a polling question the next time, I think that'll be a polling question. I'm just curious to see if we have that understanding. The cost of order processing. So when we look at this and we itemize all of these across the value chain, so you go from the source, the make or conversion, the delivery processes, we look at those, and we could use the total cost to serve methodology as a way to target cost reductions. And then if you use a methodology like this, we'll see a lot of things, a lot of areas for cost reduction and opportunity, which could be, and some of those savings could be redirected into research and development of eco-friendly products. And then if you look in this area down here in red, we see, I hope you see my mouse, we see the unplanned costs, which we call, for continuous improvement and lean practitioners, we call it the hidden factory, the waste. Remember we mentioned waste before? Well, there are 8 types of waste, operational waste: cost of defects, cost of overproduction, cost of waiting, neglect of human capital, transportation waste in our supply chains. Every time we expedite an order, or we ship the wrong product, or we ship defects, that's going to generate logistical movements, transportation, that's a waste, motion waste, and over processing in our across the board, not just the manufacturing processes. If you look at our procurement processes, how many times do we touch work packages more than once or multiple times? If you look at it in a whole, in our what do you call it, in our accounting processes, our marketing processes, our IT function, you look at it as a whole, you would see that there's excessive, in many organizations, excessive over-processing, people generating monthly duplicate reports that nobody reads. So all these are fair game for cost reduction and supply chain and supply management simplification. And on the matter of defects, every time our conversion or manufacturing processes create a defect that goes to a customer, and the customer, we have to return that. So we look at the cost of the reverse logistics, then we have to make that product again. So now we have just escalated the usage of our raw materials, right? Or you could look at it another way. You could look at it as that we have to make many passes to satisfy a customer. And once we're in that state, we consume and we use more raw materials. And that directly impacts the procurement function and the supply chain processes. So every time a defect is generated, what are the costs of generating defects in our supply chain? What are the costs of people waiting for materials in our supply chain? Every time a supplier is late or he ships the wrong product, the wrong raw materials, then you have to wait for him to reship those. And we have people in our production and conversion processes waiting for raw materials, waiting for correct information. They get the wrong information. If they get the wrong bill of materials or the wrong recipes, the wrong instruction, and they're waiting for the correct ones. And if, God forbid, that those wrong inputs or bill of materials were used that generated product that are now scrapped, right? All these impact the environment. So we want to be sustainable. We address and we attack these areas. And by doing that, we will unlock a tremendous amount of potential and for cost saving outside of the typical procurement focus of price. Many of us are hyper-focused on price, but if we look here at this total cost to serve matrix, we would see tremendous opportunity for cost reduction, tremendous opportunity for a reduction in utilization of raw material inputs, and a reduction in impact on the environment. And of course, in terms of planning the strategy, we make sure that our strategies are aligned to the corporate mandate. So if we go back a few steps, we see, right? We have the initiatives, right, in buckets number 2 and 3 that would impact the procurement or supply chain or logistic, in this case, the procurement and logistics function. They're under one person. Her name is Janice. She's the director of warehouse operations. And on this side here are her, what you call, this would be like level, in many cases, the level 2 metrics, or the level 1 metrics, or the strategic metrics. And then once you get to the departmental or the tactical or operational level, then you get the level 2 and level 3 metrics. So she has her scorecard again. So she would be accountable for driving these performance metrics. And then these are the people on her team. So you have Kathy, you have Steve, you have Kevin, and you have Trish, who report to Janice, and each one of them have their own performance metrics. And all of these performance metrics are selected in a way, and the procurement function mission. So how many of us, I have a question, how many of us have a procurement or supply chain function mission and vision? So in other words, another way of saying it is that we drive our departments by purpose, a mission, and by vision and inspiration. Big, 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 long-term thinking. How many of us drive our organizations, our procurement and supply chain and warehouse or logistics functions in that manner? And then we deploy the necessary metrics to help us and our team realize that vision, that procurement, logistics, supply chain management, vision and mission. How many of us select our metrics in a way that they will help us realize that mission and that vision, and then we align the vision and the mission at the departmental or procurement function, supply chain, logistics level is aligned carefully with the corporate mission and vision. And to go back to reiterate to a point that I made earlier, is that the procurement and supply chain functions and processes are there to enable organizations to realize their corporate mandates. So there has to be alignment. Metrics have to be aligned in such a way, and we have to run our procurement, supply chain, and logistics operations with vision and purpose. And in this case, Janice has her mission, which is to ensure that XYZ efficiently and effectively distributes superior products made with 100% eco-friendly raw materials. That's her mission. And then all of these metrics here are aligned and selected in a way that would help that procurement function realize that mission. And then if you go back, right, affordable, eco-friendly products. That's one of the corporate high-level strategies. And Janice she has cascaded her and delegated her response, some of her responsibilities to her supervisors and her direct reports, and she has aligned her metrics and her dashboards to realize that her mission and her vision that would help her organization, in this case XYZ, realize its corporate mandate. And some other considerations, if you look at the 6 big losses in business, are they sustainable? The 6 big losses in business? No. This is going to be one of the things that we're going to cover in the next section. There's 6 major losses in business that if we quantify them and we understand them, they have huge impact on our supply chains. If you look at number 6, reduce yield. So we have raw material, we buy X amount of raw materials, and our manufacturing or conversion processes are not efficient, so we have a high scrap rate. That's going to affect our economic sustainability, our fiscal sustainability. Is going to trigger, in many cases, a reorder or replenishment, unnecessary replenishment of raw material inputs, which has ecological impact. So you see how all of this is connected? So reduce yield, process defects, there you go. Slow machine speeds, idling, stops, idling, and minor stops in our conversion or production lines or logistics. Once we have idling, people waiting, and we have stop, start, stop, start, stop across the value chain, right? This, these are the key facets or ingredients for an unsustainable supply chain and supply management and procurement process. And of course, equipment failure. We know the impacts that those cause across the value chain. And then in terms of cost reduction, we look at our measurement systems, our materials, our processes, our environments, our people, our machines, all of these here. And this was actually what we call a fishbone diagram that was leveraging a real world situation. And all these areas here were problems in the process or issues in the process that was leading to a very, very costly problem that a particular organization was happening. And all of these areas here that you see in all these categories, all of them are fair game. If we reduce them, we immediately make our supply chains more sustainable. So this is a systems thinking perspective of that. And then, so I'm going to stop here for the day. Again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. Part 2, we're going to cover some, we're going to do a recap, cover some of what I couldn't get to today, and then so we pretty much did the plan phase of executing a sustainable supply strategy. Then we're going to be doing the implementation phase. How do we go about implementing so we can realize realize our strategy and realize a cost-effective, reliable, agile, efficient, and eco-friendly supply chain and procurement process. So we're going to get into the implementation phase, and then the third webinar, we're going to focus on those metrics, certain dashboards, and how we could capture that data, and we could look for cause and effect relationships with some of those KPIs. And then the fifth part, we would use that SPOT model, the supply, the strategic procurement operations transformation model, and some other tools to anchor our gains as far as supply sustainability is concerned, to institutionalize them. So it's a 4-part series. So today we dealt with the planning of the strategy and the key components that go into the planning, then again execution, and then measurement of the execution relative to what the desired outcomes were and what the gaps are, and then corrective actions and institutionalization. So again, thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope it was informative for you and a good experience, and you have a great day.